Leah's young brother helped the old man limping on the sidewalk, unaware of who he was. When the stranger extended a card with a powerful name, the boy felt his stomach turn cold. Around them, those witnessing the scene stopped breathing. Who was that man? She was half asleep on the old couch in the cramped living room when she felt panic. Aaliyah felt something was wrong before she opened her eyes. The cars outside didn't match her worry. Columbus mornings were usually gentle, especially in late spring, with sunlight and neighbors' laughter. But today, there was a feeling in the air. She didn't know what it was, but something was about to change. She sat up slowly, rubbed her eyes, and blinked. Her back hurt from sleeping on the couch. The apartment was too small for 3 people, herself, her brother Malik, and their mother Renee, who worked long shifts as a nurse. The fridge hummed, a reminder that life goes on. She smelled coffee, cheap and burnt. It seemed normal, but she felt uneasy. Aaliyah, 19, went to the window to see what Malik was doing. He had a job stacking fruit at the market a few blocks away. She saw him outside by the pavement. He wasn't hurrying off as usual. He seemed to be looking at something. She saw an old man with a walker. The man's left leg dragged and his face tightened with each wobble of the walker on the uneven pavement. He seemed alone and about to fall. Malik ran to the old man and said, "Let me help you." Aaliyah could see everything through the dirty window. Her brother reached out and the old man flinched. Malik was sincere. He helped the man over a broken pavement. The old man looked up, surprised and relieved. Aaliyah couldn't hear, but she saw Malik nod to reassure the stranger. Aaliyah's heart filled with tenderness at that moment. That's Malik, she thought, always aware and willing to help. He once gave half his lunch to a stranger outside the school gates because he looked hungry. He was kind. She was still worried. In their neighborhood, good deeds were sometimes ignored or got you into trouble. Malik did the right thing without thinking. The old man was happy and said thank you before going on his way. The old man disappeared around the corner, and Malik hopped on his bike and rode fast to the market. Aaliyah took a deep breath. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just her imagination. She went to the kitchen, not waking their mother, who'd come home late after work. Aaliyah poured herself a half cup of stale coffee and grimaced. She thought about her own situation. She had no job or money to return. She felt stuck and suffocated. In the kitchen, their mother's nurse's coat was on a hook. Renee looked worried and tired, but she always smiled or touched them gently. She raised them alone after their father disappeared, leaving only rumors behind. Aaliyah didn't think about him much. It hurt less to think he was a ghost. Their mother kept them clothed, fed, and hopeful. Aaliyah felt guilty. She was 19 and should be helping more, but her prospects seemed dim. Malik wanted to work odd jobs, which made her proud and ashamed. Outside, birds called. The city's life was heard through the walls. She heard laughter, probably Mrs. Caldwell chatting with a friend on the porch. A cat hissed. Ordinary sounds of an ordinary day. Aaliyah felt tense. Malik came back at noon, sweating. He smiled at Aaliyah. "I got extra hours today. I helped stack shelves, carry bags, and got free apples for my mom," he said, sounding happy. He didn't mention the old man, and Aaliyah didn't ask. She just watched him sit down and show her the apples and peach. She nodded, happy for him. Their mother woke up and went straight to the shower. The stress of work had made it hard to talk. Aaliyah saw Renee's eyes light up with gratitude when she saw the fruit. Every bit helped. After lunch, they went back to their routines. Renee went to work at the hospital, Malik went to bed, and Aaliyah watched TV to try to feel better. She thought about love and how it touched her life. James, her school friend. He was kind with warm brown eyes and a laugh that crinkled at the edges. They shared dreams of escaping poverty. James was pulled away by tensions, misunderstandings, and money. He got involved with a rough crowd, and though he never hurt her, Aaliyah felt betrayed by his silence. She remembered the night he didn't come to the picnic by the old basketball court. She waited alone under streetlights, mosquitoes biting her ankles, anxious. He never came and they didn't say goodbye. Since then, Aaliyah had become unsure how to trust and show affection. She wanted to connect, but was afraid of being hurt. She wanted to love and be loved, but it made her feel sick. She told herself that family was enough, but she knew that wasn't true. The emptiness hurt. As the afternoon went on, the neighborhood got quieter. Children laughed, cars honked, and someone was grilling hot dogs. Aaliyah saw Malik outside, talking to some local teenagers. He was friendly but careful. He knew how easy it was to get into the wrong crowd. He laughed at a joke and smiled. She felt protective love for him. She wanted to see him succeed and make sure he didn't have the same problems as so many others. But she still felt like something was going to change. She thought it was paranoia, leftover stress from a life of uncertainty. Tomorrow will be the same. Malik is at the market, their mother is at the hospital, and Aaliyah is trying to decide what to do next. Nothing special would happen. They couldn't afford miracles and no one cared. They were small people with small lives. Why would fate suddenly look their way? But fate often comes quietly. It doesn't shout. Instead, it comes in through kindness and vulnerability. Aaliyah would soon learn that helping a stranger could change their life. Sometimes one kind act can change things. The old man with the walker was no ordinary stranger. Malik's kindness was already affecting the world beyond their apartment. They didn't know yet. That night, as they settled in, they were unaware that the next sunrise would bring a black car to their home. They didn't know a well-dressed man would knock on their door and challenge their ideas about generosity and destiny. They didn't know that they'd soon have to think about who to trust, how to show gratitude, and what they'd have to do for a better future. Aaliyah fell asleep, dreaming of laughter and voices. The city's hum lulled her. She saw Malik by a tall oak tree, holding a golden key, while an old man smiled at him. She woke suddenly, her heart beating fast, but the dream slipped away before she could understand it. Morning would come soon, and with it, everything would change. Morning light came through the curtains, painting the walls in yellow. Aaliyah woke up. She sat up, stretched her limbs, and tried to shake off the haze of strange dreams. She knew today would not be ordinary. The kitchen was filled with the smell of coffee. Malik was already dressed and ready to go biking. "Another early start?" she asked, still sleepy. "I'm meeting Mr. Sloan at the market." Malik replied, "He said he'd train me on inventory." He poured her a small cup of coffee. She watched him, proud. He was young but acted mature. He understood the situation. Their mother was still asleep. She'd come home after midnight and barely spoken. Aaliyah admired Renee's resilience, but it hurt seeing how thin she had become. Aaliyah sighed. She needed work, but there were few opportunities in their area. She'd check the boards downtown or ask at the community center next week. Malik took a last sip of coffee, then left. Aaliyah followed, standing in the doorway for a moment, letting the air wash over her face. She saw a black sedan parked across the street. It stood out against the other cars. She frowned. The windows were tinted, so you couldn't see who was inside. Malik got on his bike as a tall, well-dressed man got out of a car. He wore a gray suit that fit perfectly. Aaliyah could sense his confidence from a distance. He looked at Malik and Aaliyah and started walking towards their home. Malik froze, still holding the bike. "Excuse me," the man said calmly. "Are you Malik?" He looked at her brother and seemed respectful. Aaliyah's heart started beating fast. Who was this man, and how did he know Malik's name? She stepped forward, folding her arms. "Who's asking?" she demanded, sounding tougher than she felt. The man stopped a few feet away, holding up his hands. "Sorry. I'm Richard Thomas. I'm here for Mr. Howard. He asked me to find Malik, who helped him yesterday morning." He nodded at Malik. That was you, right? Malik blinked. I think so. I helped an older guy yesterday. He was having trouble walking. That was Mr. Howard, Richard said. He wants me to thank you. He's private but generous. He wants to meet you and your family at home tomorrow morning. He wants to talk to you. Aaliyah felt her hair stand on end. This was strange. Why would a rich man send his assistant to find them? She looked at Malik, who was shocked. She stepped forward, her voice guarded. What does he want? We don't know him. Malik was just trying to help. Richard smiled gently as if he understood. That's why Mr. Howard is interested. Your brother was kind. He encourages young people who show compassion and integrity. He just wants to talk about an opportunity. Opportunity. Aaliyah didn't trust the word. It could mean good or bad. People had promised to help but hadn't. This man didn't look like a con artist. He was polished, composed, and sincere. Malik cleared his throat. I don't know. I have work at the market. He looked at Aaliyah for advice. Richard adjusted his tie. I understand. Take this card. He gave Malik a business card. It had one name and a phone number. Call if you're interested. We can arrange transport. Mr. Howard is retired, but still supports worthy individuals. He wants it to be easy for you. Aaliyah looked at Malik, then back at Richard. She wasn't in danger, but this was all too sudden. We'll think about it, she said firmly. Richard nodded, walked back to the car and got in. He drove off, leaving them staring at each other. Malik's eyes were wide. What just happened? Aaliyah shook her head, confused. I don't know. But she knew this could be their big chance if it was real. She felt protective. She had to be careful. People with money play strange games. Malik rode off to the market, looking distracted, and Aaliyah went back inside. Their mother came out of the bedroom, yawning. Aaliyah told her what had happened, braced for skepticism. Instead, Renee was surprised and asked about Howard, a name she'd heard before. Aaliyah shrugged. She didn't know much about local magnates. Maybe. Should we call him? Renee hesitated. Opportunities like this don't just appear out of nowhere. We have to be careful. This city is tough. Not everyone who helps is genuine. She sighed. What if this is real? Malik could get a good start, maybe a scholarship. These don't come to kids like us often. Aaliyah looked at her mother's face. She saw hope there, but also fear. Aaliyah felt it too in her gut. We'll call and ask. Later they discussed it as a family. Malik seemed unsure but interested. He wanted a better future, and if Mr. Howard was sincere, this might help. Aaliyah picked up the phone and called the number on the card. Richard answered right away, sounding nice and calm. He said a car would pick them up at 10 a.m. to take them to Mr. Howard's. No pressure, just an invitation. Aaliyah agreed, her voice calm. That evening was a whirlwind. Malik paced, excited and nervous. Renee tried to watch TV but kept asking if they should dress a certain way. Aaliyah didn't say much, her mind full of doubt and hope. James promised her a better life, but that promise broke. This was different, wasn't it? Mr. Howard wasn't making romantic promises. He was a stranger offering a hand, and it was worth seeing what he wanted. Night came. Aaliyah went outside to get some air, hugging her arms against the breeze. Two teenagers rode bikes down the street, laughing. A car engine rattled. She saw Keisha, her friend from childhood, coming out of a store. Keisha waved and crossed the street, seeing Aaliyah's tense face. What's wrong? Aaliyah shrugged and told her the story in a low voice. Keisha raised her eyebrows. Maybe your luck's changing. Or we're walking into a trap, Aaliyah said quietly. Keisha touched her shoulder. Don't let fear stop you, Allie. Keep your eyes open. People can surprise you. She gave her a quick hug and went home. The apartment felt excited. Aaliyah found Malik in his room, reading an old magazine. What if he just wants good press? Malik asked. What if he's using me to look good? Aaliyah thought about it. If he is, we'll walk away. No harm in talking. Malik nodded. His eyes shone with hope. Aaliyah saw how much he wanted this, how he dreamed of leaving these streets behind. Her heart melted. She had to be strong and protect him. Maybe it was time to believe good things could happen. The next morning came quickly. They wore clean but simple clothes. Malik in khaki pants and a button-down shirt, Aaliyah in a blouse and long skirt, and Renee in a modest dress. At 10 a.m., a horn sounded. The black sedan was waiting in the sun. Richard stood by the passenger door, smiling. They drove across Columbus to a new area. Aaliyah had never seen it before. It had big lawns, trimmed hedges, and houses set back from the road. Each house looked like a small estate. Aaliyah looked out the window, feeling sick. It felt like another world. They pulled into a long driveway with oak trees on either side. At the end was a big brick house with ivy on one wall and a long porch. Mr. Howard was waiting there, wearing a sweater vest and slacks. He looked the same but smiled. Aaliyah saw a twinkle in Mr. Howard's eye when he saw Malik. "Welcome," Mr. Howard said. "I'm glad you came." They stepped onto the porch, unsure what to do. He showed them inside, where they sat in a big room with old photos and some nice things. A marble fireplace, a Persian rug, heavy wooden furniture. He thanked Malik again and explained that he'd had a stroke last year. That morning, he had almost fallen, if not for Malik's help. "I've spent my life building businesses, employing people, but kindness like yours reminded me what really matters," Mr. Howard said softly. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to help you, if you'll let me." Aaliyah felt tears coming. It sounded too good to be true, but he seemed honest. She looked at Malik, who was looking at Mr. Howard. Their mother held her purse tightly. Mr. Howard's voice trembled. "I want to give back. You deserve a chance. Will you accept?" A silence fell. Aaliyah knew they could have this future they'd never dared to imagine. Right here, in this room, with an old man who they barely knew. Malik nodded, his voice shaking. "Yes, sir. I'd be honored." Mr. Howard smiled. "Wonderful. Let's talk about the details." They sat together in the elegant room, adjusting to this unexpected turn of fate. Aaliyah tried to calm down, taking in every detail. She could smell wood and cologne. She saw old photos on the mantel. A younger Mr. Howard with a car, a woman with kind eyes, and children in a garden. It felt like they were in his past as well as his home. Mr. Howard spoke simply. He said he used to own factories that paid good wages and gave benefits to local people. After he retired, his children moved on. And now he spends his days reading, tending to his rose garden, and thinking. "I didn't have much when I was young," he said, looking out the window. "Someone gave me a chance, a mentor who loaned me money to start my first business. I'll always remember that kindness." He turned back to Malik. "When you helped me, I saw your good qualities." Aaliyah was confused. Was this real? It felt honest. She watched Mr. Howard closely, noting his shaking hand and the way he leaned forward when he spoke. He seemed too sincere to be lying. Her mother, Renee, was moved. Aaliyah gave her mother's hand a squeeze. This could be their chance to give Malik a stable future and some breathing room. "Malik," Mr. Howard said, "I'll pay for you to go to a good technical course of your choice. I can also offer you a job at one of my companies when you finish your training. This will help you move forward." Malik was amazed. "I don't know what to say, sir. I've never had anyone do this for me." "Think about it," Mr. Howard said. "If you say yes, we'll get started. If not, no hard feelings." Aaliyah asked a question. "Why us? You don't know us. There are hundreds of young people who could use help." Mr. Howard nodded. "Yes, there are many. I help through charities. This is different. Your brother was kind. He didn't know who I was, but he helped. That's rare, and it touched me. Aaliyah felt proud of Malik and grateful. Their family's morals and sacrifices might be recognized. She still had doubts. She'd seen how money could change people. She decided to be careful, even though she wanted to believe. They talked for another hour about training programs, locations, and timelines. Mr. Howard said Malik should think about his options. Renee asked questions, her voice hopeful. Aaliyah listened and tried to understand. Mr. Howard's assistant, Richard, brought iced tea and biscuits without interrupting. Mr. Howard went with them to the porch when it was time to leave. He shook Malik's hand and nodded to Aaliyah and Renee. Let me know your decision soon. I'm ready to get started. They went home in the black sedan, watching the city pass by. Aaliyah was amazed they'd been inside that big house. It felt unreal. Once home, they gathered in the living room and talked about what had happened. Renee's voice was trembling. This could change everything, Malik. You could get a good job and maybe even go to college after the technical course. Malik looked at his hands, as if he was holding new possibilities. I've always wanted more, he said. This is a gift I didn't expect. Aaliyah was quiet, thinking, is it really this easy? She remembered stories of people being taken advantage of. Mr. Howard didn't seem malicious. He seemed tired and happy, as if giving was his way of accepting death. That evening, while Renee was tired and Malik was reading, Aaliyah stepped outside. The air was fresh, and the street was quiet. She leaned against the old railing and looked at the familiar houses, fences, and pavement. Keisha noticed her and walked over. What happened? Aaliyah told her friend what had happened. Keisha was shocked. That sounds like a fairy tale. I know. It's strange, Aaliyah whispered. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe, Keisha said, giving her a reassuring pat. You deserve a break. Your family's been through enough. Trust your instincts. Not all rich people are bad. That night, Aaliyah slept well. In the morning, they felt excited but also careful. They accepted Mr. Howard's offer. Malik called and said they would meet Richard at Howard Industries the following week to discuss the details. Renee seemed happier, humming as she made oatmeal. Aaliyah still had questions, but she didn't want to ruin the hope in their home. A few days later, she went with Malik to the city center. They took the bus and looked at the city. Howard Industries was in a renovated brick building near the river. The lobby was warm and comfortable with potted plants and a receptionist who greeted them kindly. Richard met them in a conference room with papers. He said the scholarship would cover tuition, supplies, and transport costs. Malik had to finish his training, which would take about a year to get the job. He'd start as an entry-level technician at one of their local facilities, with room for advancement. It sounded too good to be true. Aaliyah asked Richard questions. Would Malik have to pay anything back? Were there hidden terms? Richard smiled patiently. It's simple, he said. We invest in capable young people. Mr. Howard said to keep it simple. Malik learns and then works for us if he likes it. If he doesn't like it, he doesn't owe us anything, but we hope he finds it useful. Malik signed the forms. Aaliyah watched the pen sign the paper. She felt proud and scared. Richard showed them around the facility. They saw neat offices, training rooms with modern equipment, and a break area where employees drank coffee and chatted. Malik beamed as they stepped outside into the sun. This is it, sis. I'm going to learn a trade and make money. Maybe I can help you finish college. Aaliyah smiled and hugged him. One step at a time. Be grateful. She meant it. The world felt bigger and more open. In the following weeks, life changed. Malik went to a technical institute that worked with Howard Industries. Each morning, he went to classes about machinery, quality control, and problem solving. In the afternoons, he visited the Howard offices and met mentors. He worked hard to make the most of this opportunity. Aaliyah saw a change in him. He was more confident, He came home tired but happy, talking excitedly about what he had learned. Renee was proud, and Aliyah felt better. The tension seemed to go away. Aliyah still watched him. She did some research. She read old newspaper articles about Mr. Howard at the library. He was once hailed as a champion of local industry and donated to hospitals and youth programs. After his stroke and retirement, he left public life. There was no scandal or hidden motives, just a quiet philanthropist helping worthy individuals. Aliyah relaxed. Maybe not everyone was a letdown. Maybe some people just wanted to be kind. She thought of James. Was he kind at heart? Just afraid to show it? Was it wrong to think about the past? She thought she could learn from Mr. Howard. Sometimes you have to trust others, despite past disappointments. The next few months passed smoothly. Malik did well in his courses and was starting part-time work soon. Mr. Howard invited them over for tea a few times. He asked about Malik's progress, gave advice, and told stories. Aliyah liked the old man's humor. He told her about his late wife, Eleanor, who was the visionary in the family. He was happy to see Malik do well. As autumn leaves turned golden, Aliyah noticed a change in herself. She was inspired to find her own path. She started applying for jobs again and even reconnected with the community college's advisor to talk about returning to classes in the future. She felt ambitious. One afternoon, while Malik studied and Renee napped, Aliyah walked to the old basketball court where James had stood her up. The fence rattled in the breeze. She looked at the worn asphalt and peeling paint. In that empty space, she felt her old hurt. James broke his promises and lost her trust. But now, she knew not everyone would abandon her. Kindness and trust could be real. If she could speak to James now, she might say, "People can surprise you. Help can come from unexpected places, and holding on to anger serves no one." Maybe she could forgive him and move on. The next day, Malik came in holding an envelope. "Richard gave me this," he said. Inside was an invitation to a dinner at Mr. Howard's home to celebrate Malik's progress. The event would be small, with just a few people. Aliyah's heart beat faster. A formal dinner? That was a whole new world. She worried about what to wear and if they'd fit in. Maybe that was just fear. Maybe they deserved a place at the table. She looked at Malik's excited face and decided not to let doubt ruin this moment. They started saving money to buy nicer clothes. Renee asked colleagues for fashion tips, while Aliyah asked Keisha's sister for style advice. It felt like an adventure. On the evening of the dinner, they arrived at Mr. Howard's home, wearing simple but neat outfits. The atmosphere was warm. Classical music played, candles flickered, and the smell of food made them hungry. Mr. Howard greeted them with his family and former colleagues. Malik was praised, glasses were raised, and he beamed. Aliyah watched from the side, drinking lemonade. She saw Richard talking to a professor from the institute. Mr. Howard's daughter, a woman in her 50s, smiled at Malik's stories. The room was not arrogant, just supportive. It was a glimpse of a different way of life. After dinner, Mr. Howard gave a short speech. He was short but praised Malik's dedication and how a small act of kindness had led them all here. "Let this remind us that goodness still exists," he said. Aliyah was crying. She looked at Renee, who wiped her eyes with a napkin. Malik stood taller, grinning. The world could still surprise them. As winter came, mornings in Columbus got colder and the windows frosted. Inside their small home, it was brighter than ever. Malik was almost finished with his training. He had shown he was attentive and hardworking. Every day, he learned new skills and became more confident. Renee was proud of her son, and Aliyah felt happier. But life is rarely easy. Sometimes change comes from the complexity of human hearts and hidden histories. Aliyah felt there was something wrong the next time they visited Mr. Howard's home. The old man seemed tired and leaned on his cane. His daughter Andrea was there too, smiling, but looking tired. On their last visit, Andrea was warm and welcoming. Today, she looked at him more closely. Aaliyah felt there was something unsaid, like a secret beneath polite conversation. Mr. Howard said he was tired and left. Andrea spoke to Aaliyah and Malik. "My father thinks the world of you," she said. "He's old and kind. He helps people like someone helped him." Aaliyah nodded, not sure what was happening. Malik shifted uncomfortably. Andrea said, "I hope you understand how important this is. My father's health is not good, and my siblings and I worry about the decisions he makes. We want to make sure no one takes advantage of him." Aaliyah's stomach twisted. "We'd never—" "I'm not accusing you," Andrea cut in gently, yet firmly. "But we must be cautious. My father's generosity has no bounds, and sometimes people see that as an opportunity to extract more. I've seen it happen before. I just want to be certain that everything is above board." Malik's eyes narrowed. He looked hurt. "I would never hurt Mr. Howard," he said. "He offered to help me, and I'm grateful. I'm trying to make something of myself." Andrea nodded slowly, looking between them. "I believe you. I do. If I think my father's trust is being abused, I'll step in." She spoke more gently. "This is our family's legacy, and we must protect it. Do you understand?" Aaliyah felt tears coming, but she stopped them. She understood, but it hurt to be mistrusted. "We understand," she said. "We appreciate Mr. Howard's help, and will never betray him." Andrea looked at them, then sighed. "Good. I'm glad we talked. Don't let this ruin things. My father likes you both." She smiled and left the room. Malik glared at the floor as they waited for their ride home. "It's not fair. She thinks we're con artists." Aaliyah touched his shoulder. "Try to see it her point of view. She loves her dad and wants to protect him. Be honest and good. She'll see there's nothing to fear." Malik nodded, but the mood was bad. Aaliyah was also shaken. She hoped trust would come easily with kindness, but Andrea's suspicion showed her that life was complicated. Love, loyalty, and generosity are often mixed with fear and doubt. Malik worked hard at school and at work to prove he was worthy. He passed his training with top marks and got a job. Howard Industries arranged for him to start nearby, learning on the job and earning a decent wage. Renee was happy when he got his first payslip. For the first time in years, their family had a steady income. They could save for the future. Aaliyah found a part-time admin job at a local charity. Malik's progress inspired her to believe she could move forward too. On the day of the interview, she wore a simple blouse and tried to look confident. The director hired her on the spot. Aaliyah blinked back tears. Their lives were changing. But Aaliyah still thought about Andrea's warning in quiet moments. Could someone try to ruin their luck? Could old problems come back? One afternoon, Aaliyah met James on her way to the community center. She hadn't seen him in a long time. He looked older, leaner, with a scar on his jaw. He looked at her, unsure if he should smile. He looked surprised and regretful. "Aaliyah," he said, his voice hesitant. She froze, remembering the night he never came, the disappointment and hurt. But she studied him now. Tired clothes, hollow cheeks. "James," she replied. "I heard your family is doing well," he said, putting his hands in his pockets. "I heard your brother got a patron." She flinched at his words. "It's not like that. He got the chance through kindness." James nodded. "People talk. They say you got lucky with money." Aaliyah stiffened. "We didn't luck into anything. My brother was kind and was rewarded. He works hard every day." "What do you want, James?" He looked away, ashamed. "Nothing. I'm glad you're doing well. I messed up. I should have been there for you." She looked at him, thinking about the past and the present. "We were kids," she said. "We both made mistakes." She thought of Mr. Howard's lesson. Kindness and second chances matter. Maybe she could be more understanding. "I hope you find a better path too, James." He smiled. "Thanks. I might. Take care, Aaliyah." As he walked away, Aaliyah felt better. Forgiving him was freeing. She realized she was free from the past. She could trust again and believe in goodness. Winter came and snow fell. Malik did well at his new job at Howard Industries. His supervisors liked that he was punctual and eager to learn. He made friends at work. One afternoon, he was given a job in inventory management. He recorded stock levels carefully. That evening, Malik was in a bad mood when he got home. Aaliyah asked him what was wrong. Malik said that someone had said he only got the job because of Mr. Howard's favoritism. They were joking, but Malik could tell they resented it. It's like no matter how hard he worked, some people thought he just got a free ride. Aaliyah felt sad. "That's nonsense. You've earned this." Malik ran a hand through his hair. "I know, but they upset me. I keep thinking about Andrea's warning. I want everyone to know we're honest and didn't take advantage of Mr. Howard." Aaliyah hugged him. "Give it time. Do your best. Actions speak louder than words." Malik nodded, but he was still worried. She knew he was scared. Their family's reputation was at risk in these new circles. They had to prove themselves to people who didn't know hardship. Days turned into weeks, and then one morning, a crisis arrived. Richard called. His voice was urgent. "Aaliyah, is Malik home? I need to speak to you both now." Aaliyah's chest tightened. Malik was at work. "He's at work," she said. "What's going on?" Richard paused. "There's been a mistake in the inventory. Some valuable items are missing, and Malik's department is being investigated. Let's talk about this in person." He was polite but tense. Aaliyah was confused. Theft of stock? Malik was honest. He wouldn't do that. But he might be suspected because he was new. This could confirm their doubts. She ran to the facility, her heart racing. In a small office near the warehouse floor, she found Malik pale and shaking, Richard with a grim expression, and Andrea standing in the corner, arms crossed. A security manager stood by the door, looking at a clipboard. Malik looked at Aaliyah, tears in his eyes. "They think I took something," he said. "I would never—" Aaliyah was sad. She turned to Richard, her voice desperate. "This is a misunderstanding. Malik is trustworthy." Andrea stepped forward. "We're investigating. It's not just Malik. Others are under suspicion too. But some are pointing fingers because of how he got this job." Aaliyah wanted to scream. She stayed calm. "Check the records and cameras." "He's innocent." Richard nodded. "We're checking. Last week's delivery footage is missing. Somebody messed with it." Aaliyah thought fast. Who would do this? Who would frame Malik or put his reputation at risk? Could it be a jealous colleague? Malik swallowed. "I've done everything by the book. I swear." Andrea's eyes softened, but she kept her voice even. "We need proof, Malik. I want to believe you, but we must be thorough." There was a tense silence. Aaliyah touched Malik's arm. She looked at Andrea. "You said you'd step in if you saw anything wrong. That's fair. Let's talk this through." Malik would never betray Mr. Howard. Andrea nodded. "Of course. This isn't a witch hunt. We'll investigate. If Malik is innocent, we'll find out." The security manager took them to a quiet room to make a statement. Malik told his story, his voice trembling. Richard said he would look at the backup logs. Aaliyah was desperate to help. She asked about who had access to the inventory system, who worked Malik's shift, and who handled the surveillance footage. After hours of searching, a maintenance worker remembered a stranger near the camera system the night the items vanished. The security team found clues linking the theft to a former employee who had a grudge against the company. By early evening, the truth came out. Malik was innocent. He was made a scapegoat for someone else's crime. Aaliyah was relieved. Malik was tired and cried happy tears. Andrea sighed. I'm sorry. I got protective. I hope you understand why I had to be careful. Aaliyah was annoyed but nodded. We understand. This shows you what kind of person Malik is. He stayed honest even when accused. Andrea's face softened. I see that. Thank you for waiting. I'll make sure everyone knows Malik's name is cleared. She touched Malik's shoulder as a sign of respect. My father was right. Richard took them out and apologized. I know it's been a stressful day. Let me drive you home. In the car, Malik stared out the window, drained. Aaliyah spoke quietly. We got through it. They know who you are now. Malik nodded slowly. I was scared, Allie. If I'd lost this job, this chance... She took his hand, squeezing gently. You didn't lose it. You proved your worth. Back home, Renee listened and cried. I'm sorry you went through that, she said. Malik shook his head. It's not your fault, Mom. Life tests us. I'm still here. We're moving forward. Aaliyah admired her brother. This nearly cost him his future, but he didn't give in. He stood for the truth. Maybe this trial was necessary. It showed their family was honest, not just when times were easy. They had faced suspicion and come through stronger. Mr. Howard sent a note saying he was sorry, that Malik was a good person, and that he still trusted him. Malik put it on the wall above his desk as a reminder that he belonged. Aaliyah also noticed Andrea was different. She called to say she was happy and invited them for dinner again, saying that they would never blame Malik. It felt like they were finally accepted. The crisis was over, and they felt calm. They had come a long way from a cramped apartment to stable jobs, scholarships, and a network of support. Aaliyah thought about how helping an old man with a walker led to big changes in their lives. Aaliyah looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a young woman who had grown stronger, learning that not everyone would betray her. She had found work, a reason to live, and the strength to forgive. She was ready to embrace the future. Love, generosity, and perseverance could overcome doubt. Outside, snow fell. Each flake shimmered in the streetlights, as if promising hope and honesty. Aaliyah knew they had passed the test. The family was stronger because of the kindness of one old man and what they had been through. They made it. Aaliyah stepped outside one late afternoon, wrapping her scarf against the cold. The sky was gray and snow was coming. She took in the fresh air and looked down the street. She needed time to think about everything that had happened since Malik helped Mr. Howard. Malik was studying new technical manuals to advance at work. Renee was happy about their improved prospects and was even thinking about cutting back on her shifts. Their home felt different now, with hope and confidence. They weren't rich, but they weren't desperate anymore. After the crisis, the culprit was caught and Malik was cleared. People respected him at work because he handled the situation well. Andrea made sure everyone knew he was innocent. Malik settled into his role and proved he belonged there. Aaliyah and Mr. Howard became closer. She visited him with Malik, sharing tea and listening to stories. He often told them about his late wife, Eleanor. She had been kind to him and encouraged him to give people second chances. Each story showed Aaliyah that people were complex, capable of both good and bad. The key was balance. Aaliyah walked slowly towards the corner store. The ground was slippery, so she walked carefully. She thought about James and how she'd forgiven him. She didn't want to get back together. Things had changed. But it was good to let go of old resentments. The future was open. Maybe love was waiting for her. As she turned the corner, she heard a familiar voice. Keisha came out of the store with a paper bag. Hey, Ollie! Stocking up before the storm? Aaliyah smiled, grateful for her friend. I'm getting milk and bread. This winter is really coming in. Keisha nodded. How's life now your brother's a star at Howard Industries? Aaliyah laughed. He's not a star, but he's happy. That's all we wanted." They chatted some more, then went their separate ways. Aaliyah went into the shop, which was dark and smelt of old linoleum and candy bars. As she paid for her groceries, she heard someone behind her mention Mr. Howard's name. She turned to look. "Yeah, the old guy helped by the kid." "I heard he gave the kid a big break," said a man buying cigarettes. His friend laughed. "Nice story, but who does that these days?" "There must be more to it." Aaliyah stiffened but kept her eyes down. The cashier gave her change and she left. A wind blew against her cheeks. She knew there would always be people who doubted good deeds. That didn't matter. They knew the truth and built something real out of it. Back home, she found Malik and Renee laughing over a TV commercial. She felt grateful in their small living room. She never thought she'd be this peaceful. It was her reality now. Aaliyah sensed one final chapter was coming. Mr. Howard's health had got worse recently. He rarely complained, but she saw him grow more tired and his hands shake when he lifted his teacup. The last time they visited, he smiled at Malik. "I hope you keep learning and growing. Maybe you'll pass on this kindness to someone else," he said. "That's how we keep hope alive." Malik promised he would. Later, he told Aaliyah he was worried about Mr. Howard. He was scared of losing the old man who had become a mentor and friend. Aaliyah said that life's gifts often come with sadness. "He's given you a future," she said. "You give him comfort, knowing his legacy matters." Winter came. On a Saturday morning, a phone call came from Andrea. Her voice was sad. "My dad isn't doing well," she said. "The doctors say he won't be around for much longer. He wants to see you and Malik." Aaliyah felt a tightness in her heart. She told Malik, who went pale but nodded. Renee offered to come too, but Andrea said it should just be Aaliyah and Malik. They took a cab through the ice. The lights were dim in Mr. Howard's home. Music played in the background. They went upstairs to his bedroom, a warm and peaceful room with a big window overlooking snowy trees. Mr. Howard was propped up on pillows, breathing steadily. Andrea sat by the bed, crying. Mr. Howard looked up. He smiled. "My two friends," he whispered. "Thank you for coming." Aaliyah took his hand while Malik stood close, crying. Mr. Howard's voice was weak, but his eyes shone. "I wanted to see you again. This world can be kind. You've shown that. Malik, you're a good person. Keep working hard. Be honest, be brave." Malik nodded and cried. "I will, sir. I promise." Mr. Howard looked at Aaliyah. "You stood by your brother, you questioned things, you made sure this was right. Good. Keep your wits about you. Don't be afraid to trust. There are good people out there." Aaliyah's throat tightened. "I won't forget. You showed us." Mr. Howard closed his eyes. "I have one last request. Andrea and I have set up a scholarship fund. Please help us find some students who need a chance." Malik received one too. "Keep sharing it." They agreed, voices trembling. Mr. Howard smiled. Andrea put a hand on Aaliyah's shoulder, her face a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," she said quietly. They stayed a while longer, talking quietly about small things, memories of Malik's training, Aaliyah's plans to maybe return to school one day, how Renee would be proud. They wanted to make the room warm and positive, to show Mr. Howard his kindness had helped them. He fell asleep, breathing softly and looking peaceful. Andrea took them downstairs, crying. "He may have only hours or days left," she said. "He's at peace now, knowing he made a difference." Malik wiped his eyes. "He changed our lives. I'll never forget him." Aaliyah hugged Andrea. "We'll be kind like him." They understood each other. A bridge of trust had formed. Andrea knew her father's legacy was safe with them. They left the house, feeling sad but grateful. The cab ride home was quiet, except for Malik's sniffles. Aaliyah held his hand and stared out the window. Life was precious, and they were starting a new chapter without Mr. Howard. But they had his lessons in their minds. Mr. Howard passed away peacefully. Aaliyah cried for the kind old man who had given them a future. Malik mourned quietly and went to work. Renee lit a candle in the window that evening. The funeral was small and dignified. Andrea spoke about her father's life, how he came from poor roots, loved Eleanor, and gave back. She talked about how Malik helped Mr. Howard see that the next generation was kind. As Aaliyah and Malik stood by the grave, they felt the weight and beauty of this responsibility. They would keep his kindness alive. Howard Industries set up a scholarship fund in Eleanor Howard's name. Andrea asked Aaliyah and Malik to be on the selection committee, which identifies deserving young people. They reviewed applications, met young students, and decided who would receive help. It was emotional work. The first scholarship winners were announced in spring. Malik and Aaliyah went to the ceremony. A group of hopeful teenagers stood on a stage, their eyes shining. Aaliyah was happy to see a reflection of Malik in their eager faces. She thought of Mr. Howard and smiled. This made goodness grow. At home, things kept changing. Renee was healthier after cutting back on extra shifts. Aaliyah got more hours at the charity, which might help her go back to college soon. Malik did well at work and was praised for mentoring new employees. He was helping them to adapt, just as he'd once been helped. Aaliyah felt herself changing. The fear had gone. She had faith in family, love, and helping others. She didn't need to be bitter. James's memory felt distant and softened by understanding. The apartment was still small, but it no longer felt cramped or dreary. It felt like home, safe and growing. Aaliyah saw more than just worn furniture and thin walls. She saw a family who had overcome doubt and hardship to embrace a brighter path. One evening, they had dinner together. Aaliyah noticed the peace in the room. Malik talked about work, Renee laughed at a joke, and Aaliyah added cheer. After all their struggles, they had reached a new status quo, stable, hopeful, and forward-looking. Before bed, Aaliyah opened the window to let in a cool breeze. She looked at the sky, the stars above Columbus. She used to think good things wouldn't come to them. She knew better now. Life can surprise you. Be ready to embrace it. She thought about the future. Maybe she would go back to college, get a business degree, and help run a program for underprivileged youth. Maybe Malik would become a leader and mentor others. They had a foundation built on integrity and compassion. Aaliyah smiled as she closed the window. She knew she had to be careful and not forget the lessons of betrayal and suspicion, but she knew trust and love could grow in unexpected places. Mr. Howard taught them that. They would keep his memory alive and continue his legacy, one act of kindness at a time. If you feel inspired by this story, please support those in need. Share this story. Subscribe to follow our journey and others like it. Your support helps these stories reach more people. Spring came slowly, with green buds on branches and puddles in the snow. In the new season, life in the apartment on the east side of Columbus settled into a routine. Aaliyah woke early for her shift at the nonprofit, where she filed documents, greeted visitors, and learned about community outreach. Malik left for Howard Industries, looking smart and confident. Renee took a later shift at the hospital, allowing herself to sleep in. Her health was getting better. In these quiet days, Aaliyah thought about the journey they'd taken. Mr. Howard's kindness was in every success Malik achieved, and every shy smile Aaliyah got from a nervous scholarship applicant. The old man's legacy was like a gentle chorus, reminding them that generosity could ripple across generations. One sunny afternoon, Aaliyah walked home from the bus stop and passed the market where Malik used to work. The market looked the same. She stopped, remembering when he helped Mr. Howard. It felt like a lifetime ago. She imagined her brother as he was then, young and kind. Today he was still young but more sure of himself. His future was mapped out. Malik was excited when she got home. "Guess what?" he said, eyes shining. They want me to train new staff at the facility. It's a trial run, but it could lead to a promotion. Aaliyah smiled. That's amazing. You deserve it. He laughed. Remember when we thought change was impossible? When we thought kindness didn't pay off? She nodded, her chest tight. We were wrong. I'm glad we were. That night, Renee listened to Malik's news over dinner. You'll do great, son. You're smart. She looked at Aaliyah, her eyes warm. And you, Ali? Any news on your college plans? Aaliyah hesitated. She might have said it was too hard or not worth it before. She answered, I'm saving up. Maybe next semester I can start taking a couple of classes. I'm talking with my advisor. She thinks I can get a small grant. Renee smiled. Good idea. Aaliyah visited the community college later that week. It was familiar. Hallways lined with flyers, students hurrying between lectures, and the smell of coffee and pizza in the cafeteria. She met her advisor in a small office with motivational posters on the walls. They made a part-time schedule so she could keep her job and attend a few classes. Start small, the advisor said. You're not the same person who left last semester. You have more support and confidence now. Aaliyah left the office feeling better. She could learn new skills, connect with others, and find her place in this city. She might take business courses, inspired by Howard Industries. She wanted to build something meaningful and foster trust and opportunity. As she walked out, she saw James near the library steps. He was alone, looking as if he might be waiting for someone. She thought about leaving without being noticed, but he seemed different, less guarded, more earnest. She took a deep breath and went to him. James. He looked up, surprised. Aaliyah. Hi. They stood awkwardly, two people with a complicated past. He looked better, cleaner clothes, a clearer gaze. Why are you here? She asked. He shrugged. I signed up for evening classes. I'm trying to get my GED and move on from my mistakes. His voice was quiet and humble. Her heart melted. Everyone deserves a chance. Good, she said. I'm glad you're doing something good. He nodded and looked away. I was mad at the world and ran with the wrong crowd. Seeing you and your family turn things around made me rethink my choices. Aaliyah smiled. We were lucky, but we also worked hard. You can too. He looked at her, regretful. I know I messed up, but I'm trying to be better. She believed him. She could see he was sincere. Good luck, James. I hope it works out. He nodded. Thanks. I mean it. They parted ways, moving forward with lessons learned. Aaliyah didn't need more from James than that. They were different people, and that was okay. Spring flowers bloomed and the air grew gentle. Aaliyah spent her evenings looking over her class registration forms, while Malik practiced for his new job. Renee dreamed of going on holiday, maybe to Lake Erie or to visit relatives. Their lives had changed from just getting by to thinking about the future. Aaliyah would have said this was impossible just a year ago. On a sunny Saturday, Andrea invited them to Mr. Howard's house for a small gathering. There was no tension, just a warm commemoration of his life and legacy. They stood in the garden where roses had begun to bud, a gentle reminder of renewal. Andrea and Aaliyah spoke quietly as Malik chatted with some of Mr. Howard's former colleagues. Thank you, Andrea said. After my father died, I was worried I'd be alone in following his values. But knowing you and Malik are living those principles, I'm comforted. Aaliyah nodded, touched. We'll never forget what he did for us. We'll keep giving back. Andrea smiled, looking at the garden. I think he'd be happy seeing you both do well. You have friends here. You're not outsiders. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That means a lot. They walked through the garden, admiring flowers. This place felt different now, less like a grand home and more like a shared space. Aaliyah saw that the gaps between them had closed. Trust grew from understanding and respect. That evening, Aaliyah sat by the window thinking about the future. Outside, neighbors chatted, children laughed, and cars hummed. She thought about how far they'd come, from fear and scarcity to a place where love, work, and dreams could flourish. She thought about how to share their story and show that kindness can change lives. Maybe she would write it down and make it into a testimony to inspire others. She carried it in her heart and reflected on it in her everyday choices. Malik's role at work grew. He taught new employees about honesty and cooperation, as well as the technical tasks. He talked about Mr. Howard without saying who he was. He wanted people to understand that the best workplaces are built on trust and respect. Aaliyah started her classes in the summer term. On her first day back at college, she felt nervous, but as soon as she sat in the classroom, she felt at home. She listened to lectures on organizational behavior and community leadership, which she found inspiring. In the evenings, she shared new insights with Malik and Renee. They talked about ways to help young people like Malik. Renee suggested volunteering at a local mentoring program, and Malik agreed. They wanted to do something to show their gratitude. One Saturday, they volunteered at a community event to help teenagers learn about jobs and scholarships. Aaliyah saw the unsure looks on the young faces. She'd worn that expression herself. Malik showed them simple technical tasks and encouraged them to try. Renee told them about steady healthcare jobs that support the community. At the end of the day, a shy girl approached Aaliyah. "Miss, I don't think I can do this. My grades aren't good and my family doesn't have money." Aaliyah knelt down to meet her eye to eye. "I know it seems hard. Good people will help if you show them you're determined. Don't give up." She gave the girl a flyer with scholarship and mentoring info. The girl took it, her eyes lighting up. That afternoon, they felt better. Every small act and conversation helped to make our community stronger. They didn't have to be rich or powerful to make a difference. They just had to remember Mr. Howard's lesson. Generosity could be simple and make a big difference. As summer went on, their apartment became a happy place. They talked about their future plans. Malik wanted to save for a car. Aaliyah was aiming for an associate's degree, and then a bachelor's, and Renee hoped to reduce her hours. One evening, after a meal, they gathered around their coffee table to discuss starting a community initiative. Aaliyah suggested hosting monthly fairs at the community center to connect local youth with employers and organizations. Malik offered to help with contacts at Howard Industries, and Renee said she'd tell her colleagues at the hospital. It would be difficult to get funding, organize logistics, and find time, but they could handle difficulties. Mr. Howard's story taught them that starting small could lead to big changes. They wanted to give others the chance that Malik had received. In the weeks that followed, they got a small grant, permission from the community center, and scheduled their first event. Flyers went up around the neighborhood, and word spread that a local family was trying to do something good. Aaliyah worried about turnout, but Malik reassured her, "Even if only a few show, that's a start." On the day of the first opportunity fair, the sun shone. The hall had folding tables and chairs, but they had managed to bring a couple of local businesses, a vocational training rep, and someone from the library's adult education program. At first, few people came, a few teens and adults. But as the afternoon went on, more people came, interested in the guidance and resources on offer. Aaliyah saw a mother and daughter talking to a training coordinator, their faces bright with hope. Malik showed a young man a list of scholarships, explaining what he needed to do. Renee gave snacks and calmed those feeling overwhelmed. By the end of the day, 20 people had come through. Not a big crowd, but a good start. They had helped people, just like Mr. Howard had done. Aaliyah felt tears prick her eyes as she locked up the center, proud and hopeful. On the way home, they were relaxed. The city's lights twinkled and the traffic hummed. They had helped others find their way. They were no longer defined by hardship or fear. They were defined by compassion, resilience, and a willingness to help others. Aaliyah remembered her own advice: keep these lessons alive and share them with others. Now she realized that this story would live on, even if no one ever wrote it down. It would affect those they helped and those who would help others. You build a better world one quiet gesture and human connection at a time. Aaliyah imagined Mr. Howard's smile. She imagined him proud and at peace, knowing his kindness had spread beyond his lifetime. She kept that image in her heart, determined it would never fade. If you believe in this message, consider staying connected, learning more, and supporting initiatives that bring hope to those who need it. Subscribe to keep reading stories like Aaliyah's and Malik's. They show how one act of kindness can create a better future. The world was not perfect, but it was better than before. Tomorrow promised more growth and understanding. They were ready for whatever came next.